Hello, thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. We like to have interesting programs, and we had a program that's so interesting, we're going to make it part 2. We have as our guest David Wolfe, the legislative director of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. This is a very, very taxpayer-friendly group, and they've been hanging in there for many years now. And so this is part 2 of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association interview. Welcome, David.
Al, it's good to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have to pretend like nobody saw the previous part 1.
Right.
And you've been with Howard Jarvis how long now?
Yeah, 11 years this month, actually.
Wow.
So
you started when you were a kid.
I did, right out of college, pretty much. So.
Yeah. And so you handle the what happens in the California legislature, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then you have an office in Sacramento?
Yes.
And what sort of staff do you have there?
So the office in Sacramento is all of our attorneys are there. We have 2 attorneys on staff and a paralegal. And then myself as legislative director handling all the legislation and taking positions on bills and going to advocate and fight for taxpayers directly in the halls of the Capitol each and every day. And then the president of Howard Jarvis, John Kerpal, is also in Sacramento.
He's a wonderful man. We've had him at our barbecues. We've had you at our barbecues, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We've both spoken.
Yeah, he makes our organization a lot more effective because of the information we get. So now you also you're not just in Sacramento.
Yeah. We do have an office in Los Angeles, too. So our CFO and our executive director and most of our board of directors is down in Los Angeles.
I see. It's been a long struggle with Prop 13. It seems to be all the time the legislature wants to water it down and increase taxes on property owners. And so what's the state of the struggle right now?
Yeah. Well, Al, I think it's important, especially as we come upon our 40th anniversary, just to define what Prop 13 and Howard Jarvis is really quickly. Because, a lot of people, especially, younger viewers here in the audience, might not know what it is. So Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was founded in 1978 following the passage of Proposition 13. And Prop 13 did 2 things. It capture property taxes at 1% of the price at which you bought your house, and then increased it by an inflation-adjusted factor of no more than 2% a year. And it also set a 2/3 vote for any tax increases approved either by the legislature or any special taxes approved locally. So things like a parcel tax, for instance, would require, for a school district, let's say, would require a 2/3 vote, or a county transportation sales tax, for instance, would require a 2/3 vote because of Prop 13. And as you mentioned, though, that landmark initiative is under attack. Legislators would like nothing more than to get their hands on the roughly $550 billion that Prop 13 has saved over the last 40 years.
Wow.
And, they do that by amending the Constitution, since Prop 13 is in the Constitution.
Right.
And so, there's 2 measures. Assembly Constitutional Amendment 4, which would lower the 2/3 vote for both bonds and special taxes to 55%.
Now, the schools did this with school bonds?
So that was a separate measure in 2000, which was Prop 39. And that amended the Constitution, and that was approved by voters. And you're right, Al, that did lower the threshold for school bonds from 2/3 to 55%. And it's a good segue to ACA 4 because it would do that same thing now for housing and other infrastructure.
Right.
So it's just a continued carve-out, which adds more debt onto the backs of property owners.
Right.
And that's important to mention because anytime you add on debt onto your property tax bill, whether that be local bonds or parcel taxes, that goes onto your property tax bill totally separate from Prop 13's 1% cap. So you'll notice on your property tax bills, which you probably all just got in the mail, I know I just got mine, you'll see the Prop 13 1% cap adjustment, but then you'll see all these benefit assessments and all these bonds and all these parcel taxes. And that all adds in completely separate from Prop 13, can add hundreds of dollars to your property tax bill.
Right.
So it's really important, especially with these bonds and parcel taxes. Be careful in lowering the threshold because those are on your bill for 30 years sometimes and could really hurt you as a property owner.
Well, especially with people on fixed income.
Sure, absolutely. Well, and of course, that was the genesis that led to Prop 13 in the first place. People who had paid off their mortgages who were getting foreclosed on their property because they couldn't pay the property tax. People in their 60s and 70s ready to live out the American dream who had paid off their mortgages who were getting foreclosed. And, thanks to all these bonds and parcel taxes, we're getting to the place where that's happening again.
Right.
And it's concerning.
Yeah, it seems like when you get little, I guess you're getting a death by 1,000 cuts.
Sure.
Each little cut
Right.
looks like you could survive that one by itself, but when you add them all up, it's serious.
Yeah.
And now one of the things that in our rural county we're concerned about is cost of transportation.
Sure.
Because we have to drive further to go shopping and go to work and everything we do because we're spread out.
Right.
And also our economy depends on people driving here from the Bay Area and other places. And if they have to pay a big premium in the way of increased gas taxes, they may decide not to come. Or if they do come, they'll have less funds available to spend here to help our local economy.
Right.
And so one of the things, besides the Prop 13, you've been working on the gas tax, and what is the status of that now?
Yeah. So the legislature, Al, and I think it's important to mention this, was not a friend to middle-class taxpayers this year. We're a nonpartisan association. About a third of our members are registered Democrats, another 20% are declined to state. So only about half of our membership is registered Republicans. So we're completely nonpartisan in our makeup. But yet we understand that Republicans have historically, represented middle-class taxpayers and been the defender of those middle-class taxpayers.
Right.
And yet there were three separate taxes or increases, because one wasn't a tax, that were approved this year, where 9 Republicans ended up voting for these measures. And just devastating for middle-class taxpayers. So you brought up the gas tax, which was one of those. That was approved back in April, a 12-cent per gallon gas tax increase, and a 20-cent per gallon diesel tax increase. Both of those take effect actually November 1st of this year. So your gas prices are already going up. And then there was an increase in the car tax. Now, for the average vehicle owner per vehicle, that's going to be $50. But depending on the age of the car, if it's a newer car, it could be as high as $150. So, this is going to be devastating for middle-class taxpayers. We're estimating that between the fuel taxes and the car tax increase, both of which, by the way, are the highest in the nation by far, you're looking at potentially $600 a year of higher prices. And I don't know about you, even though the economy is recovering, that's still going to be very difficult for a lot of individuals, especially in rural counties here like Calaveras. And unfortunately, that wasn't even the only blow to motorists this year. There was something else called a cap and trade extension that was originally approved back in 2006 that the legislature decided to extend to 2030. And in essence, what that is, just briefly, since we kind of talked about it in the other show too, was just a pay-to-pollute scheme, whereby these industries essentially pay to pollute. They buy credits at auction, and then there's a cap, and then as the cap goes down, they have to pay more to purchase these credits and trade them with other impacted industries. And it just leads to higher costs for motorists, potentially as high as 70 cents per gallon by 2030. So cumulatively, between the two measures, you're looking at potentially $1,000 worth of increased fuel and car taxes within the next 10 years or so.
Well, that can really, really hurt rural counties such as ours.
Absolutely.
And also, you mentioned pollution. There's many scientists now that are saying that CO2 is not pollution. It's a nutrient. Our plants need CO2.
Yeah.
More CO2 means more plants, more flourishing plants. And the connection between CO2 and global warming does not exist. The core samples that were done in the Arctic showed that there was a constant pattern of increases and decreases in CO2 and in global warming. Mm-hmm. It was discovered that you had global warming first, and then what followed was increases in CO2. Well, if CO2 increases follow global warming, it can't be causing it.
Right.
And so this is like science 1A. Sure. and yet this continues claim of CO2 causing global warming.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate, Al, and I think you're right on a lot of levels, but a majority of Californians do
believe it.
Yeah,
they believe it,
and do support this cap and trade measure.
Right.
And it's just unfortunate because it's going to make day-to-day living so much more expensive for average Californians because, they have to drive a lot already. And one of the reasons they have to drive a lot is because of affordable housing issues in California. And the facts here are just devastating. Without question, California has an affordable housing problem. 1/3 of California residents cannot afford a median-priced home in the state of California, which is about $550,000. That is the median price of a home in California now. There's a further 1/3 of residents who spend half of their take-home pay on rent.
Right.
1/3. And, that's money that they're not spending on other things. They can't afford housing, so they have to commute longer to get to work.
Right.
And so they're going to be hit really hard with these gas taxes.
Yeah,
and, and what's unfortunate is, clearly there's an affordable housing problem. Clearly our roads do need more money. There's no doubt that these were problems that needed to be addressed. But the only way the legislature dealt with them was by increasing taxes. We've already been through gas tax and cap and trade. But let's talk about housing.
Right.
The legislature decided in their infinite wisdom to approve an additional $4 billion general obligation bond debt program to build more housing. And they also passed a recording tax whereby any recording claim filed at a county recorder's office will cost $75, up to a maximum of $225.
Now, that's for marriage certificates as well?
It's a good question. I don't know if it's true for marriage licenses, but it does impact things like mining permits.
What about death certificates?
It does, yeah. So the death of a spouse, for instance, would cost an additional $75. Basically, anything that you file with a county recorder will cost $75 up to a cap of $225. And this is really going to be devastating, again, for middle-class homeowners.
Right. It adds up.
Because anytime you modify a loan to avoid foreclosure, that's multiple documents you need to record, so that's $225.
Right.
Anytime you refinance a home, that's another $225.
Yeah.
Anytime you engage in a reverse mortgage, that's another $225. And so that was a bill the legislature passed this year. And there was one Republican that ended up going up on that bill as well. And ultimately was one of the final votes in ensuring that it got out of the assembly. So again, all that to say, middle-class taxpayers are getting hit left and right.
Some of the counties are passing PACE loans, and this is where local taxes, the local tax collector collects money that's been loaned by a private company to do improvements on homes, and quite often the people that are getting the loans are not really qualified to get a loan as a second loan or even a first loan because of income and other. And they're being presented as a government program, which really it's a private program that's using the coercive structure of our local taxation to collect payments. And how does Howard Jarvis feel about that?
Sure. I mean, we have no official position on the PACE program, generally speaking. What I would say, though, is, be careful what you're financing actually makes sense to finance. Does it make sense to use PACE loans to put a new air conditioner in your house? Does it make sense to use PACE loans to put solar panels on your roof? And the other thing I would mention is, if you're buying a house, read your title documents very, very carefully to see if there is a PACE loan on the property. Because if you buy the house, you will be responsible for that loan. And we've run into many people who have purchased a home not knowing that was in there, and they're having a hard time affording their property because they didn't notice that it was in the title document. And now they're left saddled paying for all these improvements. Not that they're bad improvements, but they just didn't factor that in when they purchased the house.
I think the interest rate on those loans is way above normal.
Yeah, it's probably slightly higher than normal. But
I think the California Real Estate Association is trying to bring about changes or even repeal the PACE loan program.
Yeah, I mean, the realtors have been involved in reforms to the program and basically, again, giving notice to property owners to prevent what I just mentioned from happening, which I think, makes a lot of sense because, I mean, the stories are kind of crazy. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Al, I mean, there's been, we've already talked about 3 taxes, but at the end of the day, what I want to stress to your viewers is that the most important thing is that Prop 13 remains protected.
Yes.
And whether with ACA 4, Assembly Constitutional Amendment 4, whether, that 2/3 vote threshold getting lowered for affordable housing, or Senate Constitutional Amendment 6, which lowers the 2/3 vote to 55%, to fund transportation special taxes, so things like sales taxes and all that.
Yeah.
That could lead to higher taxes in hundreds and hundreds of communities across the state if those bills ever passed. And thankfully, they really didn't move out of the legislature this year. So we can be thankful that even though gas and car taxes and documents filed at a recorder's office, while all of those are going up, and it's going to be devastating for taxpayers, at least Prop 13 was protected.
Yeah, well, that's good news. Mm-hmm. And it's good to have good news once in a while.
It is.
It makes life worth living.
Yeah, absolutely.
The cap and trade in my opinion, is so horrible. Yeah. Not just that the money they're taking is the fact that they're taking the money for no purpose.
Right.
And the science is not there.
Al, they're taking the money for a purpose. And this is what's really egregious about the 8 Republicans who ended up voting for this. They're taking the money for a purpose. A good chunk of it is going to go to build high-speed rail.
Yeah, but that's wrong.
I mean, hundreds and well, I'm not saying it was a good purpose, Al, but it is a purpose. You know, there's $400-500 million out of the over $1 billion that they're going to raise as a result of cap and trade, mainly again through higher gas prices. That's going to go towards nothing but high-speed rail. So, and I mean, that's important for people to know too, because I mean, that's not going to help you guys up here if it ever gets built,
right,
which seems very unlikely. But
some years ago, at the federal level, volunteers, experts, put together a commission. It was called the Grace Commission.
Yeah.
And the Grace Commission looked at all the different things the federal government's doing, didn't question its purpose, but only its efficiency and the amount of duplication. The Grace Commission report came back with a huge amount of squandering of money at the federal level.
Right.
And the recommendations, at least most of the recommendations on the Grace Commission were never implemented.
Right.
You know, don't you think we need to have a Grace Commission in California that would just look at that massive octopus we have in Sacramento and see what could be done?
Yeah. No, I mean, we certainly need reforms to the bureaucracy. And I mean, I'd like to see something, just me speaking personally, where we move to a part-time legislature.
I like that idea.
And the first year deals with legislation, and the second year deals with, hey, how can we make government run more effectively?
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense, but you're not going to see that pass through this legislature, not hardly. I mean, there were over 2,500 bills introduced this year.
How can you even read all these bills?
Well, you don't. I mean, but you don't. But you're just, I hope people do recognize that there are a handful of individuals fighting for you in the hallways of the state capitol and working through all these bills and just fighting for you. And unfortunately, it wasn't successful, but it would have been far worse without these voices.
Yeah, that's true.
And Howard Jarvis included.
Yeah.
So.
And also, John Coppell is just a great communicator.
Yeah.
We've had him in our annual barbecues, and he's just so popular.
Yeah.
And he kind of makes it simple, puts it down where the cats can get at it.
Right.
And of course, the Taxpayer Association is concerned not only with the taxes, but also the size of government and our Constitution. We're promoting more than just reducing taxes.
Sure.
We want to. We like to have our free society last for another 200 years.
Absolutely.
Why not?
Yeah.
We already did 200.
I know. Well, no, and that's
why not do another 200?
Yeah, and that's our goal and desire too. And it's just unfortunate that all the legislature can seem to do is increase taxes and take away individual freedom and liberty from Californians all the time. And we're just talking about taxes. I mean, there's so many other things regarding sanctuary states and other things that we could get into and won't, but just...
Oh, land use planning.
Right. Liberty's being assaulted every which way.
Yeah.
So...
now, there's several things that people could take advantage of, and one is to join the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, and they need to go to your website, which is hjta.org, and that is hjta.org. I'm saying it slow enough so you can write it.
Absolutely. No, we do encourage all the viewers out there to write it down.
Yeah, write it down.
And now, if you do enjoy, in the viewers out there, if you do enjoy what you've heard today, membership is just $15 a year. 90% of the money we take in comes from these $15 donations.
I didn't know that.
90%, yeah.
Oh, and look at the money you're spending on litigation.
Right. Right.
Oh.
So, and we didn't even talk about the fire tax and the fact that that's coming up. in court in December. We did talk about that in the other show, but just
we got 5 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. But let's talk about the fire tax then, since that's a real big deal for residents in rural areas, Calaveras, Amador, et cetera. This was approved back in 2011 as a majority vote, and it was ended up being $150 assessment. On top of the fire tax assessments that people had already voted on that they were paying,
right?
And they got no benefit in exchange for this additional $150 in fire taxes.
It went to balance the state budget.
Yeah, they pulled out money from CAL FIRE to the tune of about $50 million, and then used this money primarily from 800,000 rural property owners to backfill that $50 million. So it was a budget shell game. The property owners, and there's thousands, I'm sure, here on Calaveras, aren't getting any benefit from that. We've always said it was a tax. It should have required a 2/3 vote. That was the genesis for the lawsuit that we brought against, CAL FIRE in the state of California. And we're so pleased to report that at long last, our class action has been certified, our exhibits have been filed, 3 bankers' boxes worth of filings and research done that we just sent off to the court a couple of weeks ago. And that lawsuit's finally going to get heard in December.
December, that's only 2 months away.
Right. And, we hope to be successful in that lawsuit. We think even if we win, the state will appeal. But, it's the first step.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we would just encourage everybody, the fire tax has been suspended on an ongoing basis. So at least for right now, individuals will not get any more fire tax bills in the mail.
Right.
But we would encourage you, if you have not paid your fire tax bill over the last 5 years, to pay it. And also to go onto our fire tax website, which is firetaxprotest.org. Again, firetaxprotest.org. And fill out a petition for redetermination. Which is a form that's on that website. It's in big blue. It's hard to miss. You can see it on there.
Now, would the hjta.org website also have a link for the fire tax?
We do link to it on our website. It is one of the things on the right-hand side of the screen. But again, we would just encourage everyone to do that. There's about 75% of the 800,000 people that this impacts across the state who have not yet paid it. And even if we win our lawsuit, if you haven't paid and you haven't filled out a petition for redetermination, there's a very good chance you will not get your money back. You'll be out hundreds of dollars.
Well, if you haven't paid, you don't have to worry about getting your money back.
Right, but the state could still take out a lien against your property.
Yeah, especially if you lose.
Right. But even if we win, the state could do that. They are entitled to collect that money. Whether or not they want to collect it remains to be seen if we win, but they still could.
I think they smell something in the wind. Right. And Howard Jarvis has already made change without winning a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Okay, so to join the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association, go to hjta.org.
Right, correct.
And it's only $15.
Right.
And they can sign up, and they can also join the Calaveras County Taxpayers Association, and that's calaveras.taxpayers.org, and we are $12 per year. Thank you for joining us.
Al, thank you so much.
Thank you for watching.